big news this week. I'm
yes. Kisenosato.
Right. Yeah. The only
He's
Japanese.
Only Japanese, yeah. That's a shame. Big.
It does get it to be a bit like the proverbial, the stereotypical great white hope boxing kind of thing. The idea that the hype that goes into any, and the thing with Kisenosato as well was, he was good and he was developing, but you always got that sense that they were pushing him ahead a little bit too fast and too hard. Like he was always going to be the Yokozuna. Everyone could see that. But for people who are not familiar with sumo, there is this thing about how all of a sudden Kisenosato, who's still quite young, right? Is he 30 yet?
And he's Japanese. You should point out that their nationality, I think, is kind of important.
Yeah.
I think he's 30, 31. Yeah.
He's just turned 30. So the point is, he's reached the pinnacle of the sport, and all of a sudden he has to retire, and he's basically retiring. He's being forced to retire, basically, right? So maybe you can explain why that is. Why someone?
Oh, sure. Yeah. What happened with Kisenosato is he was the second rank of what's called an ozeki for many, many years, and he was very consistent. Never missed a match. Was the Iron Man of sumo. He was runner-up, usually the second best score of his tournament. 6 times out of 11 leading up to his promotion to Yokozuna. So in the 2 years previous, he had always been just there, but never quite enough to win the championship.
Right.
And they finally, he did win a championship. And they said, okay, that plus your past performance instead of having to win 2 in a row, we're going to promote you. Well, this didn't sit well with some fans who said, hey, you're supposed to win 2 championships in a row. That's how Hakuo did it. That's how Haramafuji did it.
Right.
And when Konishiki won 2 in a row, and they all 2 out of 3, and they didn't promote him. So clearly,
So he finally gets to be Yokozuna. His debut tournament as a Yokozuna in March, and he's fighting Terunofuji, who's a big, strong Mongolian, and he has a bout against Haramafuji, who's a very wily, strategic Yokozuna at the time, and he fell off the dohyo and he tore his pectoral muscle. So in his very first tournament at the top rank that he's been working for all his life, he has this major injury. He comes back the next day, gets a win, comes back. He has to face Terunofuji on the final day, day 15, to win the tournament.
And he's injured, right?
He's injured. He's got all this bandaging around, and he has to beat him twice because he has to beat him to give him a loss to have them have equal record and then beat him in the playoff. Right. And he does. And the crowd and the whole country went ape shit. So he's finally now won 2 tournaments in a row, and people are like, see, he can do it.
Right.
But he's injured so badly that he enters the next tournament out of Yokozuna Pride, and he only wins like 2 or 3 matches and then pulls out of the tournament. And for the next year and a half, he only completes 1 tournament and gets 10 wins. Every time else, he either sat out the whole tournament or fought 4 or 5 days and then pulled out. And people finally, after 8 of those in a row, which was a record, they finally said, look, you've got to come in this January tournament and show up and win, or you've got to retire. And he lost the first 3 days in a row, and so that was it.
But the other thing, and there were the 2 things. One, he was injured for too long, but the other thing is that there's this kind of weird rule that doesn't apply to the Ozeki, which are basically the rank below Yokozuna, but it applies to the Yokozuna that, if you're not supposed to ever lose matches on consecutive days. So you can be a Yokozuna and be 13-2, but you can't be 2 losses in 2 days. And what always happens, and even with and this is again when the Mongolians came in, they would always say, "Well, I want to keep going." They wouldn't. You're supposed to kind of fake an injury if you lose 2 days in a row, and if you do continue, if heaven forbid you ever lose three times in a row, you basically it's sort of the custom of the sport that as Yokozuna, even if you're like 20 years old, you have to retire.
Well, there's two things about that, because one, they're not supposed to lose to rank and file wrestlers because they give away this thing called a kinboshi, a gold prize, which is money the Sumo Association has to pay that wrestler. It's like $20,000, whatever that is in yen. And
that's a lot of money.
The Yokozuna can't be demoted. Once you're a Yokozuna, you can't go down in rank. You either do what you're supposed to do or you retire.
Right.
So
the smart like so you think of a wrestler. There's a wrestler called Kaio who was basically Ozeki for life. He wrestled till he was like 40 years old, and he was always he from a gaming perspective, he played it the best, didn't he? If someone who couldn't be Yokozuna, he basically sat at a rank where it was okay for him to go down and then come up again, but he never went too high, because if you go too high, you're not allowed to go down again. And he did that, and he stayed in the sport. He had the most I think Hakuho ended up beating him for the most wins ever in the sport, but he held the record for the most wins ever in sumo without being a Yokozuna because he just managed to hold on for so long. But yeah, it's a tough tradition that the Yokozuna is not allowed to lose. The other thing I remember about Kisenosato was he was the nemesis of Asashoryu. So even when he was coming up,
and Hakuho in a way, he gave Hakuho that famous loss to end his winning streak when he was so close to,
breaking the record
in a row. Yeah.
But I remember, I think Asashoryu, who wiped the floor with everybody just for some reason, and he would always hit Kisenosato earlier in the tournament, like before it was when he was still down in the ranks, and there was just something that Asashoryu would always just he'd kind of choke every time he against Kisenosato. That would always be the one loss, and it was kind of like, and you could tell because Asashoryu would get so heated up. You could tell, he would come in like, I'm going to smash this guy this time. He made me look bad last time, and you could tell he was doing himself in because he was getting so worked up about beating Kisenosato. But what would always kill me about Kisenosato was he always had this pattern where he would be this giant killer. He would beat the Yokozuna and all the Ozeki, and then he'd go drop some matches against some rank and filers at the end and give it away.
And that's why people said he didn't have the mental edge that he needed to get over that hump to win Yusho.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because he could have been remembered as one of the best Ozeki of all time, like you said, Kaio. But instead, he became Yokozuna, got this tragic injury, and now he'll forever be remembered as the Yokozuna who couldn't be a Yokozuna,
And I still get the feeling like, he would have made Yokozuna. You still get the feeling there was so many people putting so much stock because he's Japanese and trying to get up there a little bit too soon.
That's right.
He would have gotten there. So, and now they're all looking for the next guy. And again, why look for the next guy? There are these great. Why not just sell out? Of course, I mean, we are the world. There are a lot of great wrestlers out there. Why do you have to put all the great hope and the great Japanese hope?
Yeah. Well, some of the guys coming up in the sport now, Takakeisho, Mitakeumi, Onosho, are all Japanese. Even Takayasu, the Ozeki, who I think will probably become a Yokozuna next, is half Filipino, half Japanese, and the Japanese really do embrace him. So the only person who could maybe become a Yokozuna, but I don't think he will, is Tochinoshin, and he's, of course, from the country of Georgia in Europe. So, I think we really will have a Japanese Yokozuna, maybe not in 2019, but probably in by the Olympics, let's say.
Yeah.